"I was traded for a horse," the Apache girl cried. The rancher smiled. "Best deal I ever made." The morning air was dry and thin, carrying the smell of dust and grass. The land stretched wide and quiet, broken only by low hills and a narrow dirt road that few people used anymore. This was a place where old customs still lived, even when no one spoke about them openly. People here believed problems were solved through exchanges, favors, and silent agreements. Words were often avoided, especially when they carried shame. The girl stood a few steps behind the adults, her small hands tightly clasped in front of her. She was Apache, with dark hair tied back loosely and eyes that missed nothing. She was not crying, but her chest felt tight, like something heavy was pressing down on her breath. No one had explained clearly what was happening. They never did. She only knew she had been told to dress neatly and stay quiet. A horse stood nearby, strong and calm, its coat shining in the early light. The animal shifted its weight, unaware of the meaning it carried in this moment. The men spoke in low voices, careful and controlled. Their words floated past the girl, broken pieces she tried to fit together. Debt, trouble, settlement, a solution. She understood more than they thought. When the horse was led forward, a pause fell over the group. The girl's uncle looked away, his jaw tight. Her mother was not there. She had been sent away earlier that morning, unable to watch. The girl felt the absence like an open wound. She wanted to call out to ask what was happening, but her voice felt trapped inside her throat. Then it became clear. She was part of the exchange. No one said the words directly, but she felt them land on her like a sudden cold wind. The horse was handed over. A nod followed. The deal was done just like that. Her heart began to pound. She took a step back without thinking, but a gentle hand guided her forward again. Not rough, not cruel, just firm, as if this had already been decided long ago. That was when she saw the rancher clearly for the first time. He stood a little apart from the others, tall and weather-worn, his face lined by years of sun and hard work. His clothes were plain, his boots dusty. He did not look proud or angry. He simply looked certain. When his eyes met the girl's, he did not turn away. That unsettled her more than anything else. She was led toward him, each step feeling heavier than the last. Her thoughts raced. Was she being sent away forever? Would she ever see her people again? Had she done something wrong? No one answered. As she reached the rancher, she finally found her voice. It came out sharp and broken, louder than she expected. "I was traded for a horse." The words hung in the air. The adult stiffened. Someone muttered her name, telling her to be quiet, but it was too late. She had spoken the truth. The rancher looked at her for a long moment. Then, to everyone's surprise, he smiled. It was not a mocking smile, nor a cruel one. It was calm, almost gentle. "Best deal I ever made," he said. The girl's stomach twisted. His words burned. To her, they sounded like proof that she was worth less than the animal now being led away. Her face grew hot with shame, and she clenched her fists to keep from crying. She would not give them that. Without another word, the rancher turned and began walking toward his truck. A small bag was placed into the girl's hands, her things, light enough to show how little of her life she had been allowed to carry. She hesitated, looking back one last time. No one met her eyes. That was how she left. The drive to the ranch was long and quiet. Dust rose behind the truck as the road stretched on. The girl sat stiffly, pressed against the door, holding her bag on her lap. She did not speak. Neither did the rancher. The silence between them felt thick but not threatening. Still, her thoughts would not rest. She replayed his smile again and again, trying to understand it. Was he proud? Was he joking? Or was he hiding something else? When they finally arrived, the ranch spread out before her, wide fields, fences worn smooth by time, a few buildings standing firm against the land. Animals moved calmly, as if nothing unusual had happened that day. The normalness of it all made her feel even smaller. The rancher showed her inside the house. It was simple, clean, and quiet. He pointed out where she would sleep, where food was kept, where water could be found. He spoke clearly but not unkindly. No raised voice, no sharp orders. She waited for something bad to happen. It didn't. He gave her time to eat and wash. He did not stand over her or rush her. When she finished, he showed her a small room with a bed, a blanket, and a window that looked out toward the fields. It was more than she had expected, and that confused her. Kindness, when you are afraid, can feel just as dangerous as cruelty. That night she lay awake staring at the ceiling. The sounds of the ranch drifted in: wind, distant animals, the slow creak of wood settling. She thought of her people, of the firelight, of familiar voices. Her chest ached with everything she had not said. She whispered the words again, this time into the dark. "I was traded for a horse." Tears finally came, silent and hot. She wiped them away quickly. Crying would not change anything. She had learned that much already. Over the next few days, she watched the rancher closely. He rose early, worked hard, and treated the land and animals with care. He did not shout. He did not strike. When an animal resisted, he waited. When something went wrong, he fixed it without blame. She noticed he never spoke about the trade again. People from nearby places came and went. Some looked at her with curiosity, others with open judgment. She heard whispers when they thought she could not understand. She kept her head down and listened. Listening had always helped her survive. One afternoon, she overheard someone question the rancher about her presence. The man laughed softly and repeated the same words with that same calm smile. "Best deal I ever made." The girl felt the familiar sting, but this time something else followed it: confusion. His actions did not match the insult she heard in the words. He made sure she ate. He made sure she rested. He corrected anyone who spoke to her with disrespect. Slowly, without meaning to, she began to realize something important. Whatever the deal had been, it had not ended when the horse changed hands. She was still afraid. She was still hurt. But somewhere deep inside, a small, cautious thought began to form. Maybe her life here would not be what she feared. Maybe the trade did not define what would come next. The land outside her window stretched wide and open, just like the road she had traveled. For the first time since that morning, she allowed herself to wonder, not what she had lost, but what she might become. And that question stayed with her as the days moved forward, quiet but powerful, waiting for its answer. Morning came softly to the ranch, not with noise but with light. Pale sun slipped through the window and touched the small room where the girl slept. She woke before anyone called her, her body already used to rising early. For a moment she did not know where she was. Then the quiet reminded her. The ranch, the trade, the horse. She sat up slowly and listened. Outside there were familiar sounds, animals moving, wind through dry grass, the creak of wood. It felt strange that life continued so normally here, as if nothing important had happened. She pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders, then stood and smoothed her clothes. There was no mirror, but she did not need one. She already knew how she looked, small, careful, trying not to take up too much space. When she stepped outside, the air was cool and clean. The rancher was already awake. He was repairing a fence, his movements steady and practiced. He noticed her right away but did not call out. He simply nodded once as if to say he had expected her to be there. She waited, unsure what she was supposed to do. After a few moments, he wiped his hands and walked toward her. "You hungry?" he asked. She nodded. He pointed toward the house. "Food's inside. After that, you can help with the chickens. I'll show you." That was it. No shouting, no long explanation, just simple words. Inside, she ate quietly at the small table. The food was plain but filling. As she ate, she watched the rancher move around the kitchen. Everything he did had purpose. He did not rush, but he did not waste time either. She noticed he always left space between them, as if he understood she needed it. After breakfast, he showed her how to feed the chickens and collect eggs. He explained once, then let her try. When she made a small mistake, he corrected it calmly. No anger, no impatience. This surprised her more than she wanted to admit. The days began to follow a pattern. Wake early, eat, work, rest, eat again, sleep. She was given tasks that matched her size and strength, carrying water, sorting tools, helping with small repairs. No one treated her like she was weak, but no one pushed her too hard either. Still, she did not trust it. Kindness, she had learned, could disappear without warning. She watched the rancher closely, looking for signs that his patience would end. She waited for his smile to turn sharp, for his voice to rise. But it did not happen. When something broke, he fixed it. When an animal struggled, he waited. When she grew tired, he told her to rest. At night, she returned to her room exhausted, her body aching in a way that felt honest. Work tired her, but it also kept her thoughts from spiraling too far. Still, when the lights went out, the same question returned. Why her? She remembered the moment of the exchange again and again, the horse being led away, the quiet nods, the way no one had spoken her name. It hurt in a way she could not fully explain. She wondered if her family thought of her at all, or if they believed the problem had been solved the moment she left. One evening, as the sun dropped low, a visitor arrived. A man from a nearby area, loud and curious. He looked at the girl openly, his eyes measuring her like an object. She felt herself shrink under his gaze. "What's she doing here?" he asked the rancher. The rancher didn't look up from his work. "Helping," the man laughed. "Heard you traded a horse for her." The girl froze. The rancher straightened slowly and finally met the man's eyes. "That's not how I see it." The man raised his hands in a careless gesture. "Just saying what people are saying." The rancher's voice stayed even. "People can say what they want. Doesn't change how things are here." The man shrugged and changed the subject, but the girl's heart kept racing. The words followed her long after the visitor left. "That's not how I see it." She wondered what that meant. Days passed, then weeks. The ranch became familiar. She learned the paths between buildings, the habits of the animals, the sound of the wind before a change in weather. Slowly, she began to move with less hesitation. Her steps grew steadier. Her eyes lifted more often. The rancher noticed, though he did not comment on it. One afternoon, while repairing a gate, she struggled with a heavy piece of wood. She pushed and pulled, refusing to ask for help. Her arms trembled. The rancher watched from a distance, then walked over. "You don't have to do it alone," he said. She stiffened. "I can," he nodded. "I know, but there's no prize for suffering." He took the other side of the wood and together they lifted it into place. The task became easier, faster. When it was done, he stepped back and let her secure it herself. The simple moment stayed with her. That night she sat by the window longer than usual, watching the stars appear. She thought about the word deal and what it meant. A deal was something finished, completed. But here, nothing felt finished. Every day seemed to add something new. She still felt the ache of being unwanted, but it was changing shape. It was no longer a sharp pain. It was dull, quieter, mixed with questions instead of fear. One evening she finally asked one. "Why did you agree?" she said suddenly, as they sat in silence after dinner. The rancher looked at her, surprised but not upset. He considered his answer carefully. "Because you needed somewhere safe," he said simply. She frowned. "That's it." "That's enough," he replied. She did not know what to say to that. Over time, she began to notice something else. The rancher never spoke badly about her people. He never mocked their ways or dismissed their past. When she mentioned a tradition or memory, he listened. Sometimes he asked questions, not out of curiosity alone, but respect. That mattered more than she realized. Her fear did not vanish all at once. It loosened slowly, like a knot being worked open with patience. She still guarded her heart. She still remembered the horse. But now, when she heard the rancher say those words, "Best deal I ever made," they sounded different. They sounded less like ownership and more like choice. She did not know what the future held. She did not know how long she would stay. But as she lay down one night, tired and calm, she understood one thing clearly. This place was not perfect. But it was not the end of her story either. And for the first time since the day of the trade, she fell asleep without fear tightening her chest, carried instead by a quiet strength she did not yet fully recognize as her own. Time moved forward in quiet ways on the ranch. Days blended into weeks and weeks into months. The girl grew taller, stronger, and more sure of her steps. Her hands, once soft, learned the feel of rope, wood, and earth. Her eyes, once always lowered, now looked up more often, meeting the world instead of shrinking from it. But as her confidence grew, so did the attention of others. People talked. Some spoke out of curiosity. Others spoke with judgment. In nearby places, stories traveled faster than truth. They did not know her name, only the story they had shaped for themselves. A girl, a trade. A horse, that was enough for them to decide who she was. She felt it when they visited the ranch. Their eyes lingered, their voices lowered. Sometimes they asked questions directly. Sometimes they did not bother hiding their thoughts at all. One afternoon, a group of men arrived to discuss land matters. The girl was sorting tools nearby, listening without appearing to listen. She had learned that skill long ago. One of the men glanced at her and shook his head slightly. "Still keeping her here?" he asked the rancher. The rancher kept his focus on the papers in his hands. "Yes, people don't understand it," the man continued. "They think you took advantage." The girl's fingers tightened around the tool she was holding. The rancher finally looked up. His expression was calm, but his eyes were steady and firm. "People don't have to understand everything." Another man laughed lightly. "Come on, you traded a horse. That's what folks are saying." The rancher did not smile this time. His voice did not rise, but something in it sharpened. "Folks can say whatever makes them comfortable, doesn't make it true." Silence followed. The girl felt something shift inside her. It was not relief exactly. It was something stronger. He was not just tolerating her presence. He was standing by it. Later that evening she asked him about it. "Why do you let them talk?" she said. He considered her question. "Because talking is easy, doing right is harder." That answer stayed with her. As time passed, the rancher began to teach her more than just work. He showed her how to keep simple records, how to count supplies, how to understand written agreements. At first, she struggled. Letters and numbers blurred together, unfamiliar and frustrating. She nearly gave up more than once. "I'm not good at this," she said one evening, pushing the paper away. "You're not used to it," he corrected. "There's a difference." He did not rush her, he did not make her feel foolish. Slowly, things began to make sense. Words gained shape, numbers gained meaning. Each small success built on the last. She realized something important then. Knowledge gave her a kind of strength she had never known before. With that strength came questions she could no longer keep quiet. One day, after hearing yet another visitor repeat the same words with a laugh, "Best deal I ever made," she finally spoke. "You know that hurts," she said quietly. The rancher froze. He turned to face her fully. "I know." "Then why do you keep saying it?" Her voice shook, but she did not look away. He took a long breath, as if choosing each word carefully. "Because I won't pretend I regret taking responsibility, and because I won't let others decide what you're worth." She stared at him, unsure how to respond. "That smile," she said, "it makes people think you don't care." His expression softened. "Sometimes a smile is the only way to keep others from pushing harder." She thought about that for a long time. As she grew older, she began to understand the space she occupied on the ranch. She was no longer a visitor. She was not invisible. People spoke to her directly now, some with respect, some still with doubt, but fewer looked at her as something traded away. One afternoon, a woman from a nearby place approached her while the rancher was away. "You're lucky," the woman said. "Could have ended up much worse." The girl straightened. "Lucky isn't the word I'd use." The woman looked surprised. "I work," the girl continued. "I learn. I'm safe. That didn't happen by accident." The woman nodded slowly, seeing her differently now. That night, the girl stood alone near the fence, watching the land stretch out under the fading light. She remembered how small she had felt on the day she arrived. how she had believed her life had been reduced to a single exchange. She understood now that life did not stop at one moment, even a painful one. The rancher joined her quietly. "You've changed," he said. "So have you," she replied. He smiled, not the one that caused whispers, but a real one. "Maybe." For the first time, she smiled back. She still carried the memory of the horse, of the silence, of being led away without explanation. That memory would never leave her, but it no longer owned her. She had found something stronger than the story others told about her. She had found herself. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, she knew that whatever came next, she would face it standing tall, no longer defined by a deal, but by the choices she continued to make every day. The seasons changed quietly, one after another, and with them, the girl changed too. She was no longer the small, silent child who had arrived with a light bag and heavy fear. She moved across the ranch with purpose now. Her steps were steady. Her voice, once barely heard, had learned how to speak clearly. She still worked hard, but her work had meaning. She understood why things were done a certain way, not just how. She knew when to fix a fence and when to leave it alone. She could tell when an animal was restless or calm. She could read the sky and sense weather before it arrived. These were skills learned through patience, not force. More importantly, she had begun to trust herself. The rancher noticed this change more than anyone. He no longer watched to see if she could handle a task. He assumed she could. When decisions had to be made, he asked her thoughts. At first, this made her uncomfortable. "You don't have to ask me," she said once. "I know," he replied. "I want to." That simple answer stayed with her. One afternoon, a disagreement arose over supplies that had gone missing. A visitor suggested the girl might be responsible. The words were not shouted, but they cut deep. The old fear rose in her chest, sharp and familiar. Before she could speak, the rancher stepped forward. "She's not the reason," he said calmly, "and I won't hear it said again." The visitor hesitated. "I didn't mean—" "I know what you meant," the rancher replied. His voice stayed steady, but there was no smile this time. "And I'm telling you you're wrong." The matter ended there. Later that evening, the girl sat alone, hands trembling slightly. The rancher found her and sat nearby, giving her space. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "Yes, I did," he answered. She looked at him then, really looked at him. "No one ever stood up for me like that before." He nodded slowly. "That shouldn't have been the case." For a long time, neither of them spoke. That night she slept poorly. Memories returned uninvited. The exchange, the horse, the way her life had changed without her consent. She realized something important then. She had grown stronger, but she had never fully faced that moment. The next day she decided she would. She found the rancher in the early evening, sitting on the porch, watching the light fade across the land. "I need to talk," she said. He looked up and nodded. "All right." She sat down, her hands folded tightly in her lap. For a moment no words came. Then they did all at once. "I need you to know what that day did to me," she said. "Being exchanged like that, being quiet while everyone decided my future. I carried it every day, even here." He listened without interrupting. "I know you've given me safety," she continued. "I know you've treated me fairly, but I need you to understand something. I was not a thing to be handed over. And sometimes when you smile and say those words, it feels like that moment never mattered." The rancher's face grew serious. He did not look away. "You're right," he said quietly. "It mattered, and it shouldn't have happened the way it did." Her breath caught. She had not expected that answer. "I can't change how it began," he continued, "but I can tell you this. From the moment you came here, I saw a person, not a bargain. If my words ever made you feel otherwise, that's on me." Tears filled her eyes, but she did not wipe them away. "I needed to hear that," she whispered. He nodded. "And I needed to say it." After that conversation, something lifted between them. The air felt clearer, not because the past was erased, but because it had finally been named. In the weeks that followed, the girl began to take on more responsibility. She handled records, spoke with visitors, and helped settle small disagreements. People started to address her directly, not through the rancher. Some were surprised by her confidence. Others respected it. She learned how to stand her ground without raising her voice. She learned that calm could be stronger than anger. One day, she returned to the place where the exchange had happened. She stood there alone, the land unchanged. The memory still hurt, but it no longer controlled her. She spoke out loud just once. "I'm still here." The words felt steady, real. When she returned to the ranch, the rancher was waiting. He did not ask where she had been. He did not need to. "You okay?" he asked. "Yes," she said, and for the first time she knew it was true. As evening settled, she looked out over the land that had once felt like a cage and now felt like a place of growth. She understood something important then. Her strength had not come from being traded or taken. It had come from surviving, learning, and choosing who she would become. The past was part of her story, but it was no longer the whole story. Years passed, not loudly but steadily. The kind of passing that changes things without asking permission. The girl became a young woman, and the ranch became something more than a place where she lived. It became a place where her choices mattered. She now knew every corner of the land. She knew where the ground dipped after heavy rain, where animals preferred to rest, where the wind struck hardest in winter. She knew which visitors spoke honestly and which spoke only to hear themselves talk. Most of all, she knew herself. She was no longer afraid of silence. People in nearby places had stopped whispering as much. Stories still traveled, but they had changed. Now they spoke of a capable young woman who managed work with calm skill, who spoke clearly and fairly, who did not bend easily under pressure. Some still remembered the old story, but it no longer defined her. One afternoon, a group arrived to discuss a large agreement involving the ranch. It was the kind of meeting that once would have happened without her presence. This time, she sat at the table. At first, some of the men directed their words only to the rancher. He listened, then gently redirected them. "You should speak to her," he said. "She handles this." They hesitated, surprised, but they did as he said. She answered their questions with confidence. She asked her own questions too. When something didn't sit right, she said so calmly, without apology. By the end of the meeting, the agreement had changed, fairer, clearer, better for everyone involved. As the visitors left, one of them paused. "You've done well," he said to her. She nodded. "I know." The rancher watched from a distance, a quiet pride in his eyes. Later that evening, as the sun dipped low, he spoke. "You don't need me to speak for you anymore." She smiled slightly. "I know." They stood together, watching the land glow in the fading light. The silence between them was comfortable now, built on years of shared work and respect. That night she thought again about the day her life had changed. The exchange, the horse, the words she had cried out in pain. For a long time that moment had lived inside her like a wound. Now it felt more like a scar, still there, still part of her, but no longer open. She understood something important at last. That moment did not decide who she would become. What came after did. Sometime later, word reached her that someone from her past wanted to see her. The news stirred old feelings, uncertainty, anger, sadness. She considered refusing. She had the right to, but after thinking it through, she agreed. The meeting was quiet and careful. No accusations were thrown. No excuses fully healed the past. But she spoke her truth, clearly and without fear. She explained who she was now, what she had built, and what she would no longer accept. When it ended, she felt lighter, not because everything was fixed, but because she had spoken as an equal. When she returned to the ranch, the rancher was waiting as always. "How did it go?" he asked. "I said what I needed to say," she replied. "That's enough," he said. Later, sitting on the porch, she asked him a question she had carried for years. "Do you still think it was the best deal you ever made?" He looked at her carefully, then shook his head. "No," he said. "I think the best part was everything that came after. The work, the trust, watching you become who you are." She felt a warmth spread through her chest, steady and strong. "Then maybe," she said, "we should stop calling it a deal." He smiled, a real one, and nodded. "I think you're right." The land stretched out before them, wide and open, just as it always had. But now it felt different. Not like a place she had been brought to, but a place she had chosen. She stood, breathing in the evening air. Her past walked with her, but it no longer led the way. She had taken a story that once reduced her to silence and turned it into one of strength, choice, and dignity. And that was something no one could ever trade away.